Hello, I think we're live. Let me do this. Did that work? It worked. We're here. Thank you very much for coming in. Hey, okay, hold on just a second. I got to turn this light off because I think that is kind of bright and could make it a little bit difficult. But thank you very much for coming in, everybody. There's a whole bunch of folks over here, and I want to say hi. So Stephen came in early. Hello, Stephen, and thanks very much for coming in. Homefront Porch, Daniel is here. Hello, Daniel. Thanks very much, and thanks for coming in. Scott's here. Hello, Scott. Thanks for coming in today. I think it's going to be fun. The funny thing is I had something going on with my computer this week. Oh, and First Last is here. Hello, First Last. That's great. I'm so glad you guys all got to make it in today. There's a lot of stuff going on in the U.S. and around the world. So, man, I'm thinking about those folks. I've got family down in Southern California. I've got friends down in Southern California. I've got friends in the Midwest and family in the Midwest. I imagine some of you may too. So, just trying to keep in contact with them and stuff is really super helpful. So yeah, make sure you have some time maybe for them this weekend. But this is a great time to go into the weekend. This is kind of, for me, the best model building time. It's after the holidays. You don't have a lot of stuff like everything is scheduled and stuff like that. So January, February is amazing for modeling. And I'm surely taking advantage of it. It's pretty blustery outside, so this is much better. And John is here. Hello, John. Thanks very much for making it. John Robick is here, and so I mean that's brilliant. So what we're gonna do today, because my computer went wonky, so I've only that's not what I wanted to show you. I wanted to show you that. I'm gonna have some more lighting on this, but we are gonna zoom in and we are going to be taking a look at weathering. Let me get this adjusted. See, I got the different camera lens and all that jazz. And so I think we're going to have a pretty good time weathering this today and looking at a few different techniques that I found in weathering the lowest level of the D&D diorama when I was doing the temple. And so I'm really excited to show you that. We're going to use some really easy to find like materials and stuff like that. And so it's not something you have to go out and buy a bunch of stuff. I do have woodland scenic stuff and I like using it, but you can also do this with stuff that you find. So I'm going to go over here and we're going to dive right into it because I don't really have I can't show you my other screen. Again, my computer went wonky this week and I can't show you my other screen. So the only thing that I can show you today is that and my mug. So we're going to do a lot of that. So let's head over there. This is the pier for my D&D diorama. And it's on the front end of, this area back here, which is the sewer. And so I'm going to get another light going here and see if that's going to help. Yeah, that's a little bit better. And I don't have any lights on in here right now, but this is the sewer level of the diorama. And there's a spillway under this pier. And I think I will turn this light on now because I think that's going to give us better. That's a little better. So that spillway is something that we want to consider, but it's under this pier. Now, the pier has been built. It's all, scratch built out of like dowel and wood and stuff like that. It's been painted. I've got some like nice ropes here and stuff like that. I've done the sanded grout and Mod Podge down here. And let's get a little bit tighter on that so you can see. So I've got the sanded grout and Mod Podge down there. And that acts as, the floor of the ocean bay there. So that just is a spillway that comes down. So down here, I may want to have some flotsam. I may want to have some wildlife and stuff like that. I don't think I'm going to put any water up here. I think it's going to be a low tide. And that's going to allow me to do a lot of stuff. So first off, I'm going to come back out here. I'm going to show you what I got here to weather with. This is some green moss. It's like a Spanish moss. It grows on down trees in the Pacific Northwest. Let's go a little tighter. Sorry about that. It grows on down trees in the Pacific Northwest, but it's a very nice stiff moss that I can have as some plant life down here. Not that big, of course, but that's one of the things that I'll use. I also try to gather, let's come back out. This zooming in and out, boy, I hope it doesn't make anybody ill. I also do this. Now, this is just pieces of wood that I've used in construction from here and other parts of the diorama. And then I'll run them through a little blender, one of those little rocket blenders, you know, I bought specifically for this. And so I have this, and it's just beat up wood. That's great for debris down here. The other thing that I'll use is, and these are, the nice thing is this is all stuff that you can get, you know, locally. These are roots. Now, when I'm trying to use sticks, I try to stay away from sticks. If if you're using a stick for your diorama, it's typically going to look like a log. If I want a stick, just the way that roots work, tree roots is what I typically use. Tree roots will branch out and in scale look like a stick. Okay, so whenever I'm doing that, don't think about looking for sticks. Try to find some tree roots or something like that. I was fortunate. Well, I don't know about fortunate, but we lost a tree in the yard and it came down. The whole thing came down. And then I was able to go out there and harvest these really nice roots. Now, they've been sitting in here for a long time. I dried them in an old, like, it was actually a light bulb oven. It was what I had before I built my curing station here, and it would get really hot in there. And so I dried them in there, and these are a number of years old. You don't want to introduce any kind of plant life or something like that that's moist into your diorama. It can bring parasites. It can bring in bugs. The moisture itself can cause mold. There's just a lot of negatives there, right? So make sure it's like fully dried. I don't think I did it with these, and you can't do it when there's moisture in there because they won't explode, but they'll swell up so much that you can't use them, and they can catch fire. You can put it in the microwave. You got to be really, really super careful. I'm not advocating you do it. I'm saying you can do it. But do it when they're super dry, and do not do it for more than just like 2 or 3 seconds. I'm serious. Dry wood in a microwave will ignite. It will ignite. So I'm telling you, don't do that. Don't do it for a long time. Don't do it when it's wet because it'll swell. Do it when it's dry, maybe 2 seconds. Okay. And what that will do is it'll kill any kind of life in there, parasitic life that may be inside there. You don't want to introduce that to your diorama. The other thing, a little bit more passive way to do it is 200 degrees in your oven, laid out on a sheet for like a half an hour or 20 minutes. Half an hour or 20 minutes, no. Half an hour or 45 minutes. And what that will do is that's not enough to ignite wood, that you've gathered. It is enough to dry it over a longer time, but that 30 minutes to 45 minutes, that will just kill anything that might be in it. Because I think I'm beating this to death, but I don't want you to make a mistake that I did. I did it early on, so don't do what I did. So those I'll use for sticks. Now, I like to gather, let's go back and look at these. I like to gather all these things and get them ready. I don't even know if I'm going to use them all, but I just want to show you what I have here. Now, this is sand that I've gathered in the yard, and I've sifted and I've cleaned and I've washed, so there's nothing in it but sand. Here's another alternative. If you don't have just sand available, and it's just about the same consistency, this is ballast, and it's for railroading. And so you can get it online. You can get it from a hobby store or something like that. And so it's railroading ballast. And it's really nice because there's all different sizes and stuff like that. It's a little powdery. This, because I'm washing it, it's not, and it's real rock. It has its coloring, and I love the coloring of. I mean, I said rock, it's sand, but they're little tiny rocks. I just love the coloring of it. This, you're going to have to paint. You're going to have to put a sealer on it because it is porous, but it does work. And because of the color of this, that's what we're going to use for barnacles today. Okay. I wanted to show you sand because you could use sand that would have to be painted white to look like barnacles. The other thing we're going to use today is felt. So Mrs. Modelcraft does felting. And so she was kind enough to give me some of her felt. The greens are fantastic. And that is not, I'm not going to use anywhere near that. You use tiny, tiny amounts of this. So if you can maybe find a kit at a like a starter kit or something like that, go for your earth tones, like at a Michael's or a hobby store or something like that. I'm going to probably use those. The yellow is great too, because the yellow will accent. Okay. Now, I told you what we're using for barnacles. That's the ballast from Woodland Scenics. But this is just something that you can find maybe in your grocery store. It is roasted, or no, they're black sesame seeds. I don't know how they get black. Maybe that's how they are. I've got toasted and I'm the cook, but I can't tell you how they're black, but they're black sesame seeds. And the shape of the individual sesame seeds is fantastic. It looks like, when you see on a pier, when you look at the water line, and we're going to have a variable water line. It has to be below this, of course. So it's going to be like right around here. High tides could possibly go in there. But as you're looking at the water line, you see those barnacles build up here. And this loose piece of rope, we're going to build up barnacles on that because that's a really neat effect as well. But when you build that up, then you can sometimes see not barnacles, but the mussels. And that's what these guys are going to be. And the shape of them is perfect for it. So we'll do little clumps of barnacles on here too, to make it look like there's some really fun life down here. Lastly, I'm working on these guys, and they're coming out okay, but they're pretty finicky. And this one looks pretty rough. But that's a crab. And so I'll show you how, oh, I'm sorry, it's not focusing. That is a crab. And I'll show you how I'm doing my crabs. All the wires coming off, that's the legs. And of course the pincers, the claws, but those have to be trimmed down to almost nothing. It's just easier to work with them when they're this long. I've got a couple here in process, and I'll be able to show you how those are. I think in some instances like this, when you're introducing something that is going to be repeated, you have to have like bigger ones. But later on, I will be able to take some of these smaller pieces, and I'll show you how I make these and all that. I'm sorry, I'm looking in here to try to find one of these. But then we can take just very small pieces of styrene that I've punched using a leather punch, and we'll put those in there with the right color. There's your crab. You don't even have to have legs on it. So that's what we'll do today. I'm going to go back over here, see if there's any questions or anything I can answer, and then we'll just dive right in. So Jacob is here. Hello, Jacob. Hello, everyone. And Bill looks amazing. Bill, thank you so much. I really appreciate that, Jacob. And it says, I was going to ask how you cure your raw materials like roots. Very interesting. Yeah. And we live kind of in the woods, right? So it is easier, I think, for me to go out and find things. And I've done that for a lot. There's some very interesting things with mosses that you can find. And mosses grow pretty much anywhere when there's a little bit more water. They also preserve very well. Mosses are really great at kind of going dormant in dry weather. So you can take a moss, and I did this on my Tarawa diorama. You can take a moss, completely dry it out, okay? And I thought, wow, this is great, because I liked what it looked like. When the moss dries out, mosses tend to do this. They contract. So I took this little bundle of moss, and it looked like a little bush. And I'm like, brilliant. And it's totally dry, right? I did not do the microwave trick yet. So I put it on my diorama, and I glued it down with scenic glue, because I like scenic glue. It works great. I'm sure there's other things you can use, just like regular PVA or whatever, but I like Woodland Scenics glues. Not sponsored, nothing. I just like them. And so you glue that down at the bottom. But then one of the things that I like to do is I will take Mod Podge, matte Mod Podge, and this is a 50-50% mix of Mod Podge and water. And then, and sometimes I'll add a little bit of alcohol to it that helps reduce surface tension. So it soaks into stuff. And I put that over stuff to kind of use as a sealer. Well, I did that on that little awesome, piece of moss that had kind of contracted, and it soaked up that water and did that. So it opened back up. It was fine, right? Because I'm like, oh, okay, it kind of looks like a little fern at this point. But then as it dried, it contracted again. So I'm just saying, be careful with the stuff. Understand how it reacts. I mean, there was no danger in it or anything like that. But if you want a very specific thing, maybe test it ahead of time, because plants are remarkable things. And that whole opening and closing, because of the presence of moisture at that point, it's an effect that you want to understand before you go and say, okay, I need this exactly like this, and then something happens different. So take a look at it. But I think it's extremely interesting, and certainly a great resource if you can find that stuff around you. Okay, so we're going to get back into doing the live stuff, and I'm going to do it in steps. But every time I do steps, I tend to go back and reinforce things. I will introduce colors as well, and I'll show you the colors when I introduce them. Paint, acrylic in this case. And I may use other stuff, and I'll just introduce it when I'm talking to you. Okay, so let's take a look. This, again, is the area. Now, when I'm doing this, I know that I am going to eventually be putting a wash over this and more paints and stuff like that. So when I'm adding detail like this, I've just got that in mind. It doesn't have to be exactly the end at this point. I can let it dry and then come back and do some more. So we're going to do the first part today. Whenever I'm trying to add something to a surface that's been dried, I'm going to glue it. And most folks have figured this out, certainly, but I'm going to wet it. If I don't wet it, there's a chance that things aren't going to stick very well. And so I'm just wetting down these surfaces, even the Mod Podge and sanded grout. That's what this bottom part here is. It is completely dry, but it hasn't had any kind of sealer. There's Mod Podge underneath it, but as this was drying, I sprinkled some of this dry sanded grout on top of it. So it is, some of it will come off. That's totally fine. After I've wet these down, okay, then I'm going to bring in my scenic glue. I almost said sanded grout. I'm bringing in my scenic glue, and I'm going to use this as my glue palette, and I'm using the little tops of to-go containers as my paint palettes. And the reason I have a glue palette is it just holds my brush a heck of a lot better than something else, because I do try to use my brush in glue application so it's exactly where I want it. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to just stipple some of this. And what we're doing is we're going to do barnacles first. And I'm doing, remember I said, we're going to have a tide line right around here. It has to be below that spillway. So I'm stippling on this. It's a little bit heavy. I put a little bit of water in it just to thin it out, but I do want it heavy. Okay. And we'll just do this one first. And then I'm going to take these, move this out of the way, because there's just going to be a bunch of stuff falling to the ground down here. Maybe I can put something underneath there to catch it. That's probably good. And then I'm just going to put this stuff on, and I'm literally pressing it on. I'm not worried about it. And let's get, well, that's as tight as I can go. See if I can get a little closer here for you. There we go. I'm not worried about it completely, getting on there, and anything that falls down here, I can knock away. But I do want to get it on there enough to create more of a ring. I don't want it going all the way down. Some of them you'll see they get bigger and bigger as they go down. But if I do that, I'm going to put other substrates underneath there. So that's enough. That's really all I wanted there. Okay. And then I would do the same on this one. So we've got some water on there, but look at all, and I like to call these either inclusions or complications. And that's this. I've got a bunch of rope down here, and that stuff is fantastic because you have the same effect. You can take and stipple on your glue, but you don't want to glue it all down. You want it to look like as the tide comes in, this stuff is free. And so this is going to be loose and dangly and is going to have barnacles as well as mussels on it. Okay, so we've got that on there, and I'm just going to bring these in. And there's another way to do it. I've got this little scooper. It's like a little scoop I made. This might be a little easier. I know I'm going to get a bunch of stuff just everywhere, but that's okay. There we go. I want to get rid of some of that stuff that fell away down here, just so I don't get glue on it later. There we go. And then, like I said, I want to come back and free that up. I want that to kind of be floppy. There we go. I like that. Now, I do want to put, as I said, I like to put over to seal stuff. This is 50% Mod Podge and water. And so now I'm going to put this on it, and that will kind of seal over these guys. And remember, these guys are porous, so they're going to soak up some of that glue and water, and that's good. It helps it adhere very nicely. So I don't want too much, and it's making a huge mess. I could probably use a dropper, an eyedropper, and it'd be a little bit cleaner, but that's okay. All right. So now, see, I didn't put too much. I think that a lot of times when you're trying to add something because maybe it looks cool or whatever, there's the tendency to just flipping, oh, little's great, a lot's more. No, man, let somebody go, what is that? And go down and look. You want to build engagement, or you want to create an engaging thing that makes somebody want to come in and look at it. There should be some stark thing that goes, what is that? The best thing somebody can do is recognize your diorama and then say, hey, that looks like, fill in the blank, right? So that's really what I'm trying to do here. I don't have to have a bunch of barnacles down there. I just have to have what my eye is going to pick up as that should be there. And I know that's a barnacle. What else is down there? Okay, so let's go back to mussels. So now the mussels, pardon me, these are a spice. These are a seed. There is stuff in here that animals would love to eat. So these I am kind of careful with. Again, if a bug got to these guys, they would want to eat it. So when I do put these in here, I need to make sure I seal it over once they dry. If I try to seal it over, they're just going to flop down. I'm just going to lose them. But once they do get in there, I'm going to seal it over. And even though there's some white, the glue is there, it kind of looks like it's you're not going to see it. The glue is going to get transparent. It's going to be flat. You're not going to see it. You're just going to see your barnacles. So there's only grouping. And all I'm doing is I'm taking my brush, I'm dipping it in the scenic glue, and then I'm going right into my sesame seeds, I pick up, I don't know, there's about 8 on there. And as I come in here, I'm rolling my brush. And look at that. That's brilliant. They're sticking up and away. I want that to totally dry before I do like this, where I put there's a little bit of the 50% Mod Podge and water down here that I put on this, and they kind of clump together. But this sticking out part is brilliant. So I want to kind of leave that one alone. So while those are drying, I'm going to come over here and we're going to do the same thing. Now there's some dripping going on. That's all right. I'll use that. Let's grab some more mussels. Oh, that's so brilliant. Oh, that fell. I love it when they stick out, because when you look at mussels on a pier, they're bivalves. They're trying to filter water. So they need to stick out. They're not laying together like this, almost like this one is over here. They're sticking out. So that's what I'm trying to get this to do. Let me see if I can get another clump in there. Can I get tighter? I most certainly can. I hope you're getting this. I'm going to check. I'm not even looking at the camera. I'm going to check here in a second, make sure there's no issues. Sorry about that. There we go. The whole darn thing fell. So this is, oh, that's brilliant. Look at that one. This is, again, something you don't want too much, but I do want it on here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of the barnacles that fell down below, and I'm going to put them on this rope. And I've just got to kind of soak the rope in some of that glue. And I think I'm going to just do that and then put it in the dry barnacles, and it should stick. I did this in another place in the diorama in the temple, and I just love the look of it. And if you've ever seen a rope that has, been dangling off a pier or even off of an old ship for some time, there you go. There's your barnacles. So when you're doing this stuff, you kind of got to do it and then, move to a different area, because that stuff really does have to dry. It wants to flake off. It wants to slough off, like that little grouping. I just absolutely love it. I want that to completely dry, and then I'll come back and put a complete coat of the Mod Podge and water over it to seal it in. I do want it sealed in. The other thing is the painting of it. I have introduced color at this point in the past when I'm building and all that kind of stuff, but the color seems to wash. Oh, of course, it's wet. The color will wash down, and I'll lose it. So I would say, think about your color later. Get this on, let it dry, let it set up, do your overcoats even, and then come in with your paint. I like to not do one step and then move on, right? That's done. And then we move on. No, I think that there's a little bit more interactive process of putting an element on your diorama, putting another element next to it, the barnacles, then the mussels, seeing how they interact, and then making modifications maybe to the first one again. That's really how I like to work. It always, I don't close out my option of adding or modifying or changing something to make it look better in the end, of course. And so it's a continuous process. So I want to make sure, okay, I've got everybody's questions and all that kind of stuff. So we're going to get back in here. And now we're going to look at how I made one of these little, while that's drying, we're going to look and see how I made one of these little crabs. So these little crabs started out as using my hole punch. Let me come out here. We're going to get to all this, sorry. Is using my hole punch. And this is like a leather punch. And then I use some 1.5 millimeter thick styrene. and I punched out a bunch of little holes. And I keep these, you know, I use these on virtually every single diorama I make. There's just a bunch of old scrap ones, you know, but there's a bunch in there that I've done before. And so I use the largest setting, and that is where I get this. And this little you know, circle, I can then shape a little bit. And one of the things that I think is important in the shaping of it is after I get it shaped, and I'm going to see if that's going to focus properly. John Robeck knows my struggles with focus. Anyway, what I'm doing is I'm putting a groove right down the center of that. And that groove is for the legs. So now how do we make the legs? This is, I have no idea how thick this wire is. I want to say it's 32 gauge. And you know, I have my mic over here, but it's or my caliper over here, but it's only going to give me, I guess I can do millimeter. It's not going to tell you the gauge though. I don't know the conversion from millimeter to gauge, but it's 0.17 mil. And this wire is brass wire, and I like brass wire. Sometimes I have copper wire, but this is copper. Sorry, not brass. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this very thin wire and I'm going to cut 5 pieces about an inch, inch and a quarter. The length is purely because I need it for handling. They're not going to be, but maybe a 1/16 of an inch long on either side of that little piece of styrene that we're using as the turtle or the turtle. I guess you could do a turtle of the crab's body, but I just need the extra length to work with it. Okay, so I've cut 5 pieces. A crab has 4 legs on either side and then 2 claws. So we'll take these 5 pieces and you want to grab them basically right in the middle. And you just want to give them a little twist. But that little twist is a bit deceptive because you don't want the crab legs to be coming out of, okay, so I don't know if I can explain this properly. Let me get this. Here is one of the little crab starts. Whoops, I got to restart that. My my camera goes wacky. It's restart now. But this is the little crab that I'm trying to make. The white dot, that's our the piece of styrene. And so I've got a little twist in those 5 pieces of wire, and then I lay that twisted part right into that little notch that I've filed in there. And what that does is it holds it there. Just, you know, it just makes it a little easier to super glue it in. But if you make it like you twist it too much, then they're like sticking out on stalks and then they fan out. That's what I was trying to say. So you only want to do like one simple little twist like that. Okay. Then drop a little bit of glue right in the middle, stick it on that little dot in that little, or in that little groove that I made, and then let it dry. And then you can start to paint and shape and trim the legs off and make your crab. So that is what we're looking at. That now has just a little twist. I'll take a little bit of glue. And I've had a heck of a time trying to glue these because they're so small that, you know, they stick. The static will make it stick. Every person that does PE understands that. Okay, so there it is. I've just got that on there. I've not tried to spread those out yet. It's in the little groove. It's in the little little piece of it's in the little piece of styrene. When I let that dry, then I'll have this. And there is our little crab. So now there's a little bit of shaping because the shell, of course, is not completely round. So I've done a little bit of shaping there. And then it just comes down to a bit of paint to to make it look like a crab. I am using orange, yellow, and white. The orange goes right on the back. And yeah, I'm going to lock down this focus. It doesn't keep on zooming in and out. There we go. I think that's going to work right there. And now we're going to turn off our focus. So there's our little crab. And I'm going to just try to keep him there while I paint him. So I'll just take the orange and get him on there. And then it's just water. Then it's just letting that orange bleed out a little bit. And I can bring in the yellow underneath. All the yellow and the lighter tones are underneath on the legs too. And then a little bit of white under the front where the claws are coming out. And there's our crab. That's it. So maybe a little bit more white back here. Now I did all that super wet, you know, and I like wet painting with acrylics because it blends very, very well that way. You know, acrylic is a little bit harder to blend when it dries out. So that's it. That's painted. Once that dries, I can trim it back. I probably put a little bit more on the legs when I get those all shaped and stuff like that. And I may put a glue glob on what the claws are to give a little bit more depth to them, or maybe just fold the wires back to create a little bit more and then glue. And that's it. And then these guys will go right on there. Let's turn our focus back on. And then I'll just put one or two of these guys here and there, and then some on the bed, you know, the sea floor there. And then that'll be it. Okay. So I'm going to come back out. So that's crabs. I think the crabs are going to be a lot of fun. I'll show some more pictures of them, you know, later on in the week when they're done. Now we're going to look at a little bit of plant life. When I showed you these, remember these were dried out and stuff like that. You still want to kind of try to find the stalk, and then I'm going to trim them away. I've shown these scissors before. They say Pakistan on them. I don't know how to buy them. Sorry, but Mrs. Modelcraft got them for me in a fly tying kit from Cabela's years ago, 20 years ago. And I got to tell you, they're the most amazing scissors I've had. They cut through almost anything, and they stay sharp. They're just a fantastic pair of scissors, really small pair of scissors that I keep here. So I'm opening this up, and what I'm trying to do is get a visual of the sea plant that I want to see. I'm just, but you know, this stuff is all kind of crushed and stuff like that. And I also don't want it too big. And so I think this inside stalk right here is pretty awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and grab that guy. And that is a simple sea fan. When I'm trying to glue into this stuff, and again, this is the water and Mod Podge, you know, 50% mix. And then I put in the sanded grout to cement this stuff in. Well, when I'm putting this stuff in, that's grout, so it's pretty hard to get into. I don't necessarily want to drill into it, you know, to insert a stalk. But what I can do is I can take some more of it and I can make a little paste, and that's my preferred method. I make a little bit of a paste, and then I make a little mound, and then I'm adding contour. Okay, I don't want to just have this flat bottom and then you stick a bunch of stuff in it. It's not going to quite look right. The seabed is going to shift and flow. I may even have ripples in it. So this is really just a base. Okay. So to make a little paste, I'm going to take just a little bit of water. And I can use Mod Podge, but it's not 100% necessary because grout, for grout, you just add water. Okay, so that is a little bit too thin. Because I want it a bit stiff. Okay, that's a good bit. So now I'm just going to bring this in here. I can wet the base like we did previously, and that's going to make it stick real nice. And that clump now becomes my mounting point for my little sea fan. I probably need to put a little bit of Mod Podge in there too. I'm going to build that up a little bit more around there so it stays, because I don't want it to fall back. Take a little bit more on the front. There we go. Now, when I add something like that, I just got to let it sit. I got to let it do its thing. But I do want to think about, composition. I don't want to have a bunch of stuff here. And if this is a little dripway or something like that, is that going to allow stuff to grow right in front of it? Are crabs going to maybe collect around here because maybe there's refuse that sometimes comes out of here? All that kind of stuff I'm trying to think of. I am going to go over here now and get one of my roots. And I like that one. See that root? It looks like a pretty good stick. So I am going to take that. And on this one, where is my glue? Here's my glue. I want this kind of tied up with the pier. When I'm trying to build a scene, I think it's really important to think of it in terms of a story. How did that stick get there? I don't want to take it too far, but I do think that helps you in thinking about it a little deeper, trying to make things look a little bit more natural. Would that really be there? Would it not be? You know what I'm saying? How is it interacting with the things around it? Don't just place stuff down. Here's a little bit of moss. It's a different kind of moss. It's a flatter moss, but it was in with my other Spanish moss. I'm going to use it around that stick now. One of the things about placing details, and this is in just like in general, like if you're decorating your office, you want to think in terms of three. Three is just this one natural grouping that we are used to seeing. And so when I do like a little pile of rocks, you'll now that I'm saying it, if you haven't noticed it before, it'll be a pile of 3 rocks. Sometimes there's an accent to it, but think in terms of 3 when you're, doing that kind of stuff. In this instance, I am going to grab, where is it? I have some larger rock here too, and I want to add a large stone down here, again, for some more visual interest. I'll just take it, dunk it in my glue, and I'm going to place it here. I don't want to concentrate everything here. I do need to do something over here, but before I do something over here, I want to put barnacles. So that's why I'm not getting too close to these. I think I can get in there with barnacles, but here I think I have to wait till that dries so I can do some more barnacles. Okay, now I want to put in, and I'm kind of doing each of the elements that I've talked about, and showing you how I put them in. I will do more of one or the other, but right now I'm just trying to show you how I work with each of these materials to, create these different details or elements that I'm going to add here. I will come back and do more of everything. Okay, so now we're looking at this. This, as I said before, is felt. And my wife told me, this is model craft, you don't want to cut it, first off. You want to pull it. So when you're trying to get a little bit out of there, you want to pull it. And by pulling it, what I can do is I can get a nice long bit of it. Now, what I'm going to do with this is I want to have some of this kind of around here, it's going to look like things that are growing on here. I don't want it, what am I trying to say here? I want it to look like it's something growing, not something that's wrapped around it. You know what I mean? But that's how I'm going to apply it. So I'm going to do the same thing as before. That's why I've got this, my big funny glue deal. This is a silicone mat, basically. And so I wet it in here. I get that 50% Mod Podge and water. I get it nice and wet. And then I can pick it up and it's going to stick to anything I put it on, pretty much. I'm letting some of that glue dribble out. I can put more glue on later. But I'm going to put it on there and then I'll spread it out where I want. Okay. Okay, that's awesome. See, again, I'm not trying to wrap it around it. It's not something that fell there. It looks like it's in just a string right now, but once it's there, then, okay, now it's on. Now I'm going to come back and you pull it, you tease it apart, and then it makes almost like, well, it looks like moss. So I'm going to get a couple of these guys, and now we're going to start teasing this stuff. I don't want to grab the opposite one. This is really hard to keep my fat head out of the way. I just want you to know. I'm going to great extents. See, there you go. It just, the whole thing now, it looks like there's moss or whatever. I don't think it's called moss in the ocean. I don't know. But that is growing right there. Some can string down. That's okay. But that's really what I was looking for. So I need to spread it apart back here. And when that dries, it will keep a little bit of its loft, it sticks up a little bit. And it'll keep some of that as it dries. This is a great place to also have a crab, because the crabs are getting little micro animals that are living in this. The color will also change. It'll go back to this. It'll be a little bit duller than this, but that's why I want to use some of this. Now, I'm not going to take a lot of this at all. I can put this in here, and my wife showed me, there's a technique. You just put them on together and you pull them together and it mixes well, but I'm just going to put it on top and it's totally fine. Get a little bit of moisture on it. I'm going to bring that in just like before, wick some of that off there, and then I can bring that in there. And then that's just going to be a color. It's not going to, it's just going to vary the color. So you have a little bit of modeling. You can also go in, open this up, go in and pull some of the other stuff through it. There's all kinds of stuff you can do with this felt, but it makes a really neat effect. Okay, there we go. I will most likely come in and make that a little bit less than what it is. Off air. After the live stream. Because that's a bit thick, but it's really easy to work with. I mean, to get it on there, but it is a little bit finicky to get the shapes and things you want. But it's the best thing I've seen. Some of the other stuff that I've seen professionally, or I guess commercially is the better word, available. Uh, it pulls apart and all that kind of stuff, but it's more of an insulation. The felt will shrink down into itself and look more like a mat, a covering of something green that's growing, and I like that. Whereas the other stuff, I don't know, it's a different material. It's not felt, and so that's why I prefer using this. Okay. Let me see. John, what's the sticks motivation? That's absolutely correct. What's my motivation? I need to get into the scene. So yeah, that's fun. That's part of this is you're taking these materials and you're finding and building a scene, and think of it as layers. You put the barnacles down first, they're drying, and I'm working on something else. But the stuff that I just did, the felt and the other stuff, the rock and the stuff on the ground, once that dries, I got to come back and work on that. So it really is a process of going back and forth and back and forth and building those details. Do I ever get to the point where I pull out a detail that I put in? Sure, I have. I've had instances where I'll put something in, it didn't quite work out the way I wanted, and I pulled it out, but I think that's just the learning process that you have to go through. You're going to find your style. You're going to find what feels right to you. The great thing about doing details in your diorama is you're setting up a communication. When you're doing details like this, I'm setting the atmosphere. I'm saying it's wet or it's dry or it's low tide or high tide. I'm doing that. You're doing that in your diorama. But in effect, what you're doing is you're communicating with the person who views it later. And I've talked a lot about this. But I just have to keep reminding myself that new people come on and stuff like that. But when you're building a diorama, when you're drawing a piece of art, when you are sculpting something, when you're creating, what you're doing is you're putting something down, and it is the start of a conversation. It's the start of you conveying a message to someone else. You don't know who's going to see it later on. And later on, when somebody does see it as the viewer, they're looking at this thing that you built yesterday or 10 or 500 years ago, like if you're looking at Da Vinci stuff. But when you're interpreting in that, you are taking what that artist put down, glued down, configured, sculpted, whatever. You're taking that in. You're finishing that start of the conversation that the artist had. So when you're building your diorama, when you're trying to create, something that conveys a message, possibly a full story, that's what I really try to do. I want to convey a story out of these. When you're doing that, think about trying to get that message to someone, right? I hear a lot of build for yourself. 100%. I get it. And that's true. But I'm not building. Oh, let me say it different. I am building something that I'm so familiar with, I don't have to put a lot into it for me to understand what I'm saying with my diorama, right? Because I know it. So think in the terms of a viewer who's not familiar with your building, has never seen one of your dioramas, has never seen, maybe you're like me doing videos and nobody knows anything about it. They walk up to whatever you've built cold. How do you voice that conversation now? How do you visually communicate the idea that you're trying to convey in your diorama to them? That's what I continuously think about. because I think that helps you in that's enough detail, that's not enough detail. And I'm not saying I nail it every time. No, I said that is the aim of everything that I do, is to try to convey as best I can, hopefully a complex idea that is interesting, they want to look at. But it is a communication point. This is how we communicate through whatever we're building, be it a model, be it your painting, be it weathering. Weathering makes sense. If you want to give emotion in your diorama, well, one of the best ways to give emotion in a diorama is with people. Have figures in there. It's hard to, I guess you can set an emotion by having like a serene scene or something like that. It's like, it's all Zen or something like that. That could help you attain an emotion. But to see an emotion in a diorama, I think that really requires something sentient in the, not really sentient, but like a figure. Robots, animals, whatever, something that has some kind of a human element to it in your diorama. That's when you can start extracting emotion. So all of these different things I'm trying to think of when I do my diorama so that I can get that message across. It really is trying to be a storyteller, trying to convey an idea, trying to tell something to someone when you're not there. So think of that when you're adding your details. How do I add them? Where do I put them? Am I trying to create a scene that I saw one time, a memory, recreate a memory? Well, that's fine, but memories are very specific to specific people. So again, using the trick of how is someone else going to interpret this without me being there to explain it? That's a really good thing to have in mind as you're building your diorama. Okay. And John says, agreed. I built a castle tower, and a lot of common reaction was it needs a dragon. Sure. I think everybody's going to take their own past and bring it into your diorama. And so you kind of have to be open to that. And I've seen your castle tower, and it's awesome looking. But it is right smack in the middle of that era. And the tiles on the roof are really cool, and they kind of look like scales. I think that's where maybe some of it's coming from, John. But there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's fun that people feel comfortable to say it needs that, because as soon as they do that, there's a little bit of ownership in it. They've invested a little bit. If they just were like, whatever, it's a lot better than that kind of a reaction. And I think I've talked about this before. I used to get upset, say, oh, you ought to do this or you ought to do that, and I explain my dad. You say, well, you do it then if you're so. But I think when somebody says something like that about your art or about whatever you're built, I think it's your art. I think that they've got a little bit invested in it, and I think that's a positive thing. If nothing else, it's a wonderful way to start a conversation about your art with someone, right? Utilizing that to make a connection with somebody about something that you built is a pretty amazing thing. And so, gosh, jump right into it, talk to them about it. Tell them your motivation. There you go, John. Tell them why that is. Tell them what excites you about your diorama, because some of that communication got through. Some of your ability to communicate with that person without you there got through. They're commenting on it. They're looking at it. They're engaged with it. That's a very positive thing. So, yeah, I think that's wonderful, John. And I know, John, he wouldn't take it negatively, but yeah, I didn't take it. I thought, yeah, it needs something more evocative. There you go. I think that's one of those things that I talk about. And okay, so it's totally on my mind because I'm working on the video that releases on the 15th, my long form video. And I've got 6 points in there that I kind of made up, but they are things that are really important for me when I'm building my diorama, to try to keep engagement and to try to keep telling that story and to try to, give somebody a reason to look. And that's the first thing. The very first thing about your diorama should be, why would they look at my diorama? Why would they look at my model? Why would they look at my display? Why would anybody look at it? First off, that's the number one question you got to ask yourself when you're building and you're trying to decide how I'm going to put it here, how I'm going to put it there, or what things I want to include in it, or what's the angle, whatever. When you're trying to build your diorama and your display, or even just show your model off, why is someone going to look at yours? Now, if there's a sea of them there and you don't care if anybody looks at your diorama or your model or your presentation or your piece of art, that's perfectly fine too. But if you want someone to look at it, you have to ask yourself that. Why would they? And from that perspective, I think it can give you ideas to make it more of an attention getter, almost like a hook. When you hear a song, there are those songs that, man, you hear one note, two notes, bang, it's in your head, you're singing it, and you're remembering something about it. So that's a hook, right? Well, there are visual hooks too. When you see a diorama or a model or something like that in a sea of models, why do you go to that one? What draws you to that? Those are the questions I like to ask myself when I'm trying to create and figuring out what I want to put in there, and how I'm trying to place that little piece of felt. What's its purpose? Why is that going to draw someone in? Those are the questions that I ask myself and then try to answer through building. So it seems to be a pretty good system, and that's a pretty good plug for my video coming up on the 15th. So that's a long form video. I shot it last night, and it should be ready here pretty soon. I'm this weekend I'll be working on it too. Well, folks, that's about it. Now, one of the weird things is I can't get that screen. I've got a computer screen over there that I can typically show you things, and I want to talk about the patrons because I had to show the screens. I can't. I don't know what the heck to do. So I do want to talk about my patrons, though, because tonight we have the patron group build. It is from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Pacific time. I will send out the information through Patreon. About a half an hour at 5:30, I send out the link, and that goes to all patrons that are paid on it. And it's $3 for everything on the site. I've got it here somewhere. I don't know where it went. It was here. I have something that I wanted to share with someone that was interested. Here it is. This week I got an email from someone who responded to one of my videos, and it was the shop walkthrough. If you haven't seen that, it's like the main video on the shop or on the channel. And so Dan Witten 7966 says, "Hey, do you have any plans for your standing desk?" So, and I had a picture. I can't show it to you. I built the standing desk and years ago, and it's in my shop. And so I did post on Patreon today a bunch of pictures because I found the original drawings. I'm not going to say they're plans, they are drawings. And sorry, that's kind of dumb, but anyway, so I took a bunch of pictures of these drawings and put them on Patreon, and I made those available for anyone to see. There's like 24 pictures. I tried to get in real tight for anyone to go look at, because you don't have to be a paid member. You can just be a member. So it's just all members of my Patreon channel, which there's a link on my channel. You can go to Patreon, Scale Model Craft, and you can go find those. So if Dan Witten I'm gonna send him an email too. But if Dan Witten 7966 is out there, those plans are up there. And I say they're not plans because really when I put them up or when I use them, I drew them at 8th scale. And then I would literally just go up there and take measurements directly off of them and go build. So there's not a lot of measurements. There's, you know, if you're really interested in building it, I can absolutely, you know, help and take live measurements on it. I did mods. I have a bunch of pictures on it. And so that information I can also put up there. I do not draw a lot. I was surprised I had those. I do not draw a lot of my projects. I'm a organic type builder, and I think it's just really fun because I don't know what's going to happen next, and it's just huge problem solving. You know, I'll do this, and I'm like, man, what am I going to do next? And I love that. I don't know. So that's how I build, and so unfortunately, that doesn't have a lot of, you know, I don't have like CAD files, something like that. I worked in CAD for 23 years. I don't want to do CAD just because I did it for so long. But yeah, those are up there. So, and I wanted to thank my patrons and my members because I have growing members on YouTube, and I have a nice little scroll thing, and it's over there, and I can't show you. But I did want to thank everybody because my Patreon is growing. My members are growing, and I really appreciate that. And I'm trying to figure out how to do more valuable content, you know, shorter. Maybe that's a good one. This is like an hour and 6 minutes. I have been trying to do shorter live streams because I'm hoping that's better. But I do hope for some feedback for folks about the kind of content that I do that you don't and do like, so that I can give you more of the better parts of it. So that's what I'm hoping to do. So please give me your comments and give me your suggestions. And this year, I'm really trying to make a big jump in the content and what I put out, and consistency in getting my stuff out, you know, to you. So thank you again. I'm just dragging. I'm going to get out of here. Enjoy the heck out of your Friday. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. I'm going to be here. I've got friends that are going to be on. I will see all patrons and folks tonight from 6 to 8, and it'll be a lot of fun. So I hope you have a